All right, today we're going to try something a little different. The topic for today is something that I've been noticing quite a bit lately. So, back in the 80s with Reaganomics, Reagan introduced basically what turned out to be a war on workers, where finance was elevated over labor. And the result of that was worker wages have been suppressed for about 45 years, and CEO wages, not wages, CEO earnings are something on the order of 315 times more than worker wages, where they used to be something more like 40. So that was one of the big things. Reaganomics has been very successful on keeping workers down. But now it's sort of like we've moved into phase two, because one of the things that laws and government policy has done to keep worker wages down is to favor corporations, especially big corporations, and to stop enforcing things like antitrust laws. And that's been so successful. Corporations arguably are more powerful than any government in the world, including the government of the United States of America. And so now corporations are sort of running wild, and they're getting into their own thing, which is the war against the consumer. So today I have a real life consumer sitting right next to me, and we're going to talk a little bit about the experiences of people who are consumers in the United States of America. So this is Bridget. Bridget, do you want to say anything? Introduction to our sure to be lively discussion of how we're getting screwed by big companies?
I'm ready to rock this. So I don't, yeah, I'm riled up about being a consumer and being at a disadvantage. So bring it on.
Yeah, so it's really a big turnaround. The onset of tech in the 90s actually, and also companies like Walmart, actually drove prices down. And then in the early 2000s, George W. Bush welcomed China into the manufacturing space, which also drove prices down because China didn't pay its workers anything worth mentioning. And so we got flooded with a lot of cheap Chinese goods, many of which were defective, but we got flooded with them. And now, since the pandemic, everything has switched. So I'm going to give an example from my own life. I used to rent a very charming little apartment in a very charming little city at what was a reasonable rent. And then after the pandemic, the property management company started nickel and diming me. So, and they did it without raising the rent. So the first thing they did was water used to be included. Now they said that I was going to pay my fair share of the water costs, but when I get a bill from them, there's no way to tell if it's really my fair share. And in fact, I'm pretty sure it wasn't my fair share because I was very thrifty with water. Then they added on trash collection fees. Then added on a fee for charging me fees. Yes, a processing fee to offset the money it cost them to take my money. And it just kept going up every single month until effectively it was a rent increase.
Now, was it rent control in your community?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, they could have raised the rent also, and they did raise the rent also, but they just tacked on fees for all this other stuff as if, well, what's the consumer going to do about it? What's the renter going to do about it? It's so hard to find a place to live anyway. And part of the reason it's so hard to find a reasonable place to live in America, it's because there's price fixing. There's software that allows property management companies to basically compare prices, which you're not supposed to do because that's price fixing. Not compare, collude with each other on prices, so that no matter where you go in the United States, your rent is basically determined by this one software. So they just figured I'd, shut up and take it. Boom, one of the people who gets pretty fed up. So I did not just sit there and take it. I moved out and I found an alternative living arrangement. And that's, quite frankly, what I'm going to do because I get pretty fed up. But I know not everybody can just, do that. It actually took me, I don't know, a few months to do that. I think, what, 2 or 3 months to find an alternative living arrangement. But it's just unbelievably
Frustrating.
Yes.
Yes, frustrating.
For them to charge me for charging me. And they also did other things where you had to pay a service fee to pay your rent. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable. So, fellow consumer, I know you have your sister.
Yes, yes. So the exact same thing happened with her. And so for her, they decided, and she'd been living in this place for, I don't know, like decades, again, maybe 15, 20 years. But all of a sudden, they decided that if you were going to renew your lease, which it wasn't a month-to-month lease, by the way, it was for a year. So if someone wanted to move out sooner, they'd have to pay this exorbitant amount to move out. But then they implemented this thing that to renew your lease, you had to sign up and purchase renter's insurance through a company that I'm sure was affiliated with them. And it wasn't an exorbitant amount, but it was an additional amount of money that my sister, who has a fixed income, and she is very, very low income living, for her to actually have to scrape together the money every year to cover this new renter's insurance that they kind of stuck on everybody. And she lives in a place that's basically kind of a slum. I mean, it's not a particularly nice place. They seem to want to jack up the rent so that it's competitive with like big city rent prices. So they
Thanks
also
to price fixing.
thanks to price fixing, exactly. And so now they've also raised her rent. She doesn't live in a rent control community either. The maximum amount every year, where the previous people who handled the property were a little more flexible based on people's income about when and how they raised the rent. They would still raise the rent, but they were as cutthroat as this faceless property management company. And on top of that, they added a $50 a month fee for having a pet. They added, and again, sort of similar to your situation where there's this mysterious amount every month for water, trash, and sewage that is not a fixed amount. It sort of fluctuates from month to month. And they set, my sister also is kind of an elderly person and not very tech savvy, but she was paying, she'd walk over to the office and give them, a check every month. So, but they changed that so that you had to download an app, share your bank information with them. And if you didn't do that, they were going to charge a fee if you paid by check. So, so she, I set her up with the app, so that's taken care of. I'm not crazy about them having access to her bank account. I'm sure it's secure, but it just seems a little. And she was able to get a letter from her doctor to waive the $50 a month fee for her cat. So she was at least able to get out of that. But it's just very difficult to wrap your mind around having to pay all these extra expenses if somebody is she barely has enough to pay for internet, to pay for her electricity, and she lives in a place where she needs to have air conditioning running. And everyone who lives in this place, it's a low income kind of situation, but this property management company doesn't care, and they, as you said, are just nickel and diming everybody for this.
Yeah, so there's a number of things in what you said that are really relevant. So one, it's open season on low income people. It's almost like target practice, seeing what they can do it's not that it's ever been easy to be low income in America, but now it's just, they're just hunting people for sport with all these extra fees and the ways they rescind benefits and raise fees and do all this kind of stuff. Just to make it very hard for people to live.
And they're also, I suspect they're trying to get people to move out so that they can jack up the rent to whatever the current competitive rate is. But it's, again, she lives in this small community. It's not like it's a, urban rate rents, which just seems utterly unreasonable. But also, if she could move, I mean, it's really difficult for her to move because finding a place that's even less than this place is very difficult. There's not a lot of places available, and the waiting lists for low income housing, forget HUD. HUD is utterly inaccessible. She's been on the HUD list for 30 years, it seems. So that's out of the question. It's the waiting lists are so long that I don't know if she's ever going to be able to move into one of these low income places either.
Right, and that's another distortion of the market. So with this whole Reaganomics and corporatism thing, what it does is it has shifted the provision of services and goods away from quote unquote normal people who are not rich and toward luxury. So luxury housing is being built, but affordable housing, as they call it, is not being built. So, and people in America do not like homelessness, but it is allowing these sort of corporate friendly policies that increases homelessness because your sister is a type of person, and there are so many people like this, millions of people like this in America, who are a month away from homelessness if somebody doesn't come to bail them out. And this is absolutely unacceptable to Americans, but it's very acceptable to multinational corporations and the billionaire class that, quite frankly, is not human. And what I mean by that is corporations have been taken over by AI and algorithms. And there, so you're talking about the previous company. Well, there was a human factor, right? There was somebody you could interact with. You could pay by check. You could walk over to the office and say something. You could tell them your cat's name, whatever it was. But the human factor is being erased. Mm-hmm. And the net result of getting rid of the human factor is a society that doesn't care about humans. And we consumers are humans, right? Like robots don't really consume anything except electricity and water and natural resources that are all being, fouled up by large corporations. But they don't, buy stuff. They don't go out to eat. They don't do things. So we're getting into this very odd economy where the thing that sustains the economy is being, crushed like mortar and pestle.
And it feels like the levels are getting obliterated, and it's turning into this sort of homogenization of what everything costs. So like the lower levels where people could afford things are getting wiped out and swallowed up by this kind of, I guess it would be the algorithm to sort of average out to the highest quotient of the cost of living. And it just doesn't seem right.
Doesn't seem right, and it's also unpleasant, right? I mean,
it's very stressful. It's a very stressful thing.
People don't like it. Um, so let's see, I was gonna bring up food, of course. Mm-hmm. Food. Boy, have food prices gone up. And there's lots of ways that this shows up. But I went to, I think it was a Ralph's. So for people who don't know, on the West Coast, Kroger is sometimes called Ralph's. So Kroger is one of the biggest grocery chains in the United States. I mean, there are other large ones like Publix, and in Texas you get H-E-B, but Kroger is one of the largest ones in the United States. And I went there, and I don't like to shop at Kroger, but they're not a good company. But I went there to pick up some things, and I was like, how do people buy food? I don't know, Bridget, what has your experience been? And just with food prices and grocery stores and the like.
Well, they just keep creeping up, and I've sort of noticed it very distinctly, even at places like Costco and Trader Joe's, which used to be, fairly reasonably priced, and everything has, inched up like a couple dollars. Actually, in the case of Costco, a lot of their produce was very economical, and I was pretty blown away the last time I was there that the price of berries doubled, and the price of various vegetables, even for a place like Costco, has gone up very, very noticeably. And it's sort of, even the price of milk has gone up. Yeah, all sorts of just sort of basic. The price of meat has gotten incredibly unattainable. It's just harder to buy meat now.
Yeah, so there are a lot of factors in this that are worth discussing. So I first noticed the increase at a warehouse like Costco a few years ago, back when Biden was president. And as was pointed out to me relentlessly by the media, there was a lot of inflation under Biden. So I did notice it at Costco. But then we're not, Biden's no longer president, Trump has been president, we're in his second year. People have told me, oh, well, inflation has gone down. But the raw fact is that it's cumulative. So, like a couple of years ago, before Trump was elected, my food budget was one thing. It's now $200 higher per month. And the bulk of that, where I really had to just set aside more per month, that came under Trump. So inflation is not going down. And part of the reason inflation is not going down, eggs are cheaper, I will admit that. Part of the reason inflation is not going down is because of tariffs. So people like you and me who are fruit and we like our veggies, these tariffs hit us pretty hard because there are tariffs on what used to be called, sort of basic food items like fruits and vegetables. So that just keeps getting worse and worse. Now, I don't know if some of these tariffs are going to be struck down. Some were struck down by the Supreme Court. There's another lawsuit that says the overall tariffs were not good. But even if the tariffs are struck down, there's not a guarantee that the prices will go back down for consumers. One, because companies don't like to reduce prices, right? Once they've got you at that level, they want to keep you at that level. So it's easier for prices to go up than for prices to go down. And there aren't a lot of, alternatives that you can switch to if you want fresh fruit and vegetables other than growing your own, if you live in a place where you can grow your own. So, and coffee, which I consider a necessity, has gone up incredibly. There are a lot of problems with beef production in the United States, but a big part of the problem is just 4 companies own like 80% of the beef processing. Now, you could say that maybe people don't need to eat as much beef or whatever, but the fact is, if you're a consumer, things are getting worse. So,
Well, and it used to be ground beef was, a go-to economical source of protein. And
yeah,
maybe not necessarily every night, but it would be a staple. And
a staple.
you could stretch it with tomato sauce or meatloaf. So there, it's just was a good thing to have on hand if you needed a little.
Yeah, I mean, Americans lived on it. I mean, it's just really incredible. So now we also got to talk about fast food, and we got to talk about restaurants.
Yes.
Non-fast food restaurants.
Yes.
Sit down restaurants.
Well, I'm kind of gobsmacked at how what used to be. I mean, yeah, lunch used to be anywhere from $10 to $20. Maybe a nicer restaurant would be maybe 25 to 35. But now, if I go out to lunch with my sister, it is pretty consistently $50 and more. And this is again not fancy restaurants. This is, not splurging on alcohol or cocktails. This is just, lunch and maybe, iced tea. And that's quite a jump.
Yeah, so what's happening or what's going to happen is people are going to go out to eat less, which is going to put more pressure on restaurants. So restaurants are low margin to begin with, right? They're not making a ton of extra money, but the cost of everything that goes into having a restaurant is going up. Your rent or your lease, your energy costs, your water costs, your food costs are going up, your labor costs are going up. Everything's going up. So when I was doing a little research for this, I was just looking at people's comments in various forums, and people were talking about spending $35 at Wendy's or
Yeah, that's just so wrong.
yeah, or
And McDonald's used to be, you'd get like a nice, a relatively tasty, cheap breakfast or cheap lunch. And it's the same thing. It's, $20, $30.
yeah, it is. It's literally over $20. And again, I'm not advocating that everybody, should be eating fast food all the time. And you and I, we don't eat a lot of fast food, I wouldn't
No,
say.
it's sort of a little fix one every now and then, but sometimes the reason for that would be, you just want like a quick cheap lunch, and it's now I can't justify
Right.
having spending that kind of money on a base on fast food. It just is. I just can't go there now.
Yeah, and for you and me, we live in an area where there are grocery stores, a variety of grocery stores. They're not all the big chain grocery stores, so we can shop. But people who live in the city sometimes, like literal access to grocery stores was difficult. So I'm not saying that's good. In fact, it's horrible. But for people, again, on the low income, a meal at McDonald's might be, the most realistic way to sort of tide yourself over for the incredible hassle and expense of going to a grocery store. So, there's an obvious shift, but the point is, it's not easier, it's harder for the consumer today. And the other thing, and this is driving people nuts, and I'm not kind of really going to blame anybody for this, but in America, tipping called tipflation.
Yes. Oh my gosh, tipping. It used to be if you had a sit down meal, you'd give a tip and you'd write on the ticket. Now people show up with this. Well, first of all, you're standing in line to pick up like a coffee or a snack at a what is it, like a serve yourself situation, and there's that tip shows up, and they're standing right there because it's on the iPad or whatever, and they're standing right there looking at you. And I tip it now. I'm tipping way higher than I ever did historically because, first of all, there's a young person. Part of me feels, compassion for them trying to make a living. So I'm guilt tipping all the time. But it's, and also because they're standing there, so you're not going to hit no tip, F you. But so,
Right.
I'm going to tip them also again because I want to, I want to support the workers because I know they're not getting paid very much, and they're most of them are students getting it. But it's also it is now thrust upon us, and it has kind of become an expectation. And it used to be that so not only the tip suggestion range, it used to be, I don't know what, like before I would double whatever tax would be, so I'd tip maybe like 15 to 17%. So now the tipping choices are 20, 22, 25%. And you can customize it, but then you have to have math skills to be able to calculate that. And so they keep creeping up the percentage too. So I mean, I don't want to deny people their tips. I mean, they certainly deserve that, but it's also a little diabolical how, even the serve yourself, standing in line situations, and you're buying an ice cream cone and you have to tip, it's already, a salt and straw ice cream is, already an insane amount of money. And then on top of that, you're giving like a $5 tip. So it's, that is just, the maraschino cherry on top of the, if you excuse the connection to ice cream, on top of how expensive it is to eat out.
Yeah, and you charged extra for that maraschino cherry, even if you didn't ask for it.
Exactly. And that cherry wants a tip too.
And the cherry wants a tip, exactly. Special cherry tip. Yeah, so it is diabolical. And there's a couple of things that, I mean, I can't blame the people who are actually serving the food, but even if all they're doing is handing you a pre-made ice cream. But I can't blame those people. But there's a couple of things. One is the software, right? So the software, I mean, it's diabolical. The software basically does what corporations want software to do, which is make getting rid of your money and giving it to them seamless. And so they work on that, and so the software does that. And you're right, it used to be like a tip would go from 10 to 25. Forget that. That those days are gone. Yeah. So now I think it's like 20% is what they're aiming for.
Oh yeah.
And I will go for the 15 if it's a self-serve, but like you, I guilt tip. And then the other thing is the habitual practice in the United States of not paying people enough. So, and this is a real problem because, as you may or may not know, the federal minimum wage hasn't gone up in like 30 years. So,
well, isn't that why McDonald's raised their prices? Because a law was passed for fast food restaurants to pay a higher minimum wage, and so it seems like places like McDonald's retaliated by they hopefully they are paying their people more, but they retaliated by raising their prices very, very noticeably.
Well, actually not, because that was not a nationwide thing.
Oh.
And McDonald's prices have gone nationwide. I'm not saying that every store in the country, McDonald's outlet or franchise in the country charges exactly the same, because I don't know that. I don't have that information on hand. But the fast food prices have gone up everywhere. And this is sort of the thing that companies do is they like to blame workers, right? For, we're paying workers 24 cents more an hour. So that's very, very, very problematic for us. My raise as CEO was $37 million, but that's not a problem at all because that's just business as usual. But the problem is because we've had so many years of anti-worker propaganda, especially by the GOP, but not countered at all by the Democrats, we have not been raising wages the way they're supposed to, which is in line with productivity. So all that's been going to the top. Well, what that means is if it had been being raised incrementally as it should have been,
cost of living wise,
yeah, we would not be in for such a shock now. But now to raise wages to where they should have been is a big shock to the system because we haven't been doing it. It's like the whole outlook of neoliberalism, the economy in the United States and what the Western world has exported all around the world is the only thing that matters is profit. So if there are termites eating your house alive, you don't do anything about that because that would cost money and eat into your profit. So basically we've been hollowed out from the termites that we've allowed to grow in our economy for 45 years because we didn't do any maintenance on anything, not just bridges and roads, and nuclear power plants, but our utilities, everything. Our wages, we didn't do anything. We didn't invest in anything except making financiers like Jeffrey Epstein extremely wealthy. And the result is the world that we're actually living in, which no matter which side of the political spectrum you're on, nobody seems to like.
And it also seems like a lot of benefits from workers have been reduced or compromised or their portion raised. I mean, I know people who work for big companies that seem like their benefits have been chipped away at with each, new cycle.
Well, that's actually true. And, part of that is healthcare. And so healthcare, I mean, is probably the most horrible example in the American economy. Costs and costs to, and these are just, in this case, it's not consumers, it's just people, rising faster than the overall rate of inflation for decades. So part of this, and I don't know how much we can get into this, but part of this is Medicare. So Medicare started in 1965, and the idea behind Medicare was that you would go to whatever doctor you wanted anywhere in the country. They would take Medicare, and then you would pay your Medicare into Medicare, which we still do. And then when you were qualified for it, you went to the doctor, and the doctor will get reimbursed by Medicare on a fee for what is called a fee for service. So if you went in for a physical, they got a certain amount of money from Medicare for a physical, your doctor did. If you went in for, a broken toe, you got a certain amount for that. If you went in for blood tests, blah, blah, blah. So that's the way they did that. So Medicare became very, very big business over the years as the United States became obsessed with the idea that big companies have to make profits, even if it's bad for the entire society. So what happens is hospitals and large doctor practices and what's sometimes called corporate medicine are like, ooh, we get reimbursed for every service. So now there's all these kinds of services that nobody needs that are being pushed on Americans right, left, and center. So there's all this unnecessary stuff that keeps happening, and it's very expensive stuff. And so it's been proven economically that a fee for service model encourages wasteful spending. And then you add in the big corporations like United Healthcare that have figured out that you can own the pharmacy, you can own the pharmacy benefits manager, you can own the MRI machines, you can own the physicians, you can own everything. And so basically you can jack up prices, reduce benefits, and who can stop you? You're like 70% of the damn healthcare system in a locality. People are
exactly. And my pet peeve with healthcare in general is that there is utterly no transparency.
Mm-hmm.
You go to your doctor and tests are ordered or blood work or whatever, and you have no idea how much this costs. There's no price list. Anywhere else, you go to the mechanic, you go to the grocery store, you go anywhere else, you know what it costs to get this service. The healthcare industry is a complete mystery until you get this insanely exorbitant bill after the insurance company is kind of checked off what they will cover and not. But just the fact that you have no clue whatsoever what some general services are is just beyond my comprehension. Then there's some health insurance companies that do a price list that is accessible, but most of them do not. It's a complete mystery, and the pricing is insane.
It is. That's an excellent point, and it's been well documented, and it's a major distortion. people who think capitalism is working very well in America like to talk to free markets and things like that. And if you do anything, it's against a free market. But in a free market, people can see and do price comparisons. So healthcare is in no way a free market. And the other thing is, you can't make rational economic choices when you're in the emergency room.
No, you're at the mercy of the.
Yep,
system.
exactly. What are you going to do? Say, okay, I've been bitten by a rattlesnake, but I'd like to do some price comparison on the anti-venom. You can't do that. You're swollen up. You're going to die, right?
Yeah.
And they can do whatever they want.
And the nurses and the doctors have no idea either. Again, all of this stuff gets kind of siphoned off into billing, and they're just in there trying to save you from dying from a snake bite. So they have no clue either. It's a mystery.
Yeah, I think the word we're looking for is clusterfuck.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah, so actually, there's a lot to say about healthcare pricing. We'll sort of leave it at prices keep rising for consumers, whether they're paying for insurance, whether they're paying out of pocket. There is no price transparency, and there's a lot of consolidation among hospitals and a lot of private equity and consolidation that is making healthcare in the United States of America worse.
Yes, it's much more difficult to get any kind of treatment and be able to afford it for regular people.
Yes, so there are a lot of things that need to stop, but one of them would be to get these excessively large corporations out of the business of healthcare and stop acting like the sole purpose of medicine is profit. Because that's not the sole purpose of medicine.
It becomes a black hole. It's this bottomless pit of profit when that money could be distributed and spent probably more efficient if it wasn't driven by that.
Oh, absolutely more efficient. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you wouldn't have designer healthcare for some people while other people literally die in the emergency room because no one can get to them. In rural areas, there aren't emergency rooms for a long ways, a long drive for many people.
Yeah.
That's really not acceptable, but it is what the market pushes America towards, because you can do this designer medicine for the wealthy people and just let the poor people kill over.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So we've been having some good times, dooming and glooming. Is anything for consumers getting better that you can bring to mind?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything. I mean, one great thing used to be the variety, the selection. But I feel like that is actually about to shrink. We might lose, also not be able to afford stuff too. But it seems like what used to be such a plentiful selection of choices might be in danger. That's not a positive. Well, it's a positive thing that exists now that I once is going to get kind of shrunk. But I can't think of I can't think of anything positive at the moment. I wish I could. Be nice to have some sunshine on that.
Yeah, I can't either, other than the fact that there was a noticeable trend in the early 2000s where people were encouraged literally by the government to buy a lot of useless shit to prep up the economy. And people got into a lot of debt, literally just driving themselves crazy buying things that they didn't need. And I think there is a lot more sober outlook on the part of consumers now, and a willingness to not just fork over their cash to every big company that has its, hands out for it.
Mhm.
I don't know that we've sort of reached a moment that's a real tipping point, but there are things like the consumer boycott of Target.
Mhm.
I personally strongly support boycott of Amazon because Amazon, this is a whole nother topic, is raising prices for everybody everywhere across the United States. So there is sort of this, there's, general calls for general strikes or no buy days or things like that. And quite frankly, when you're not drowning yourself in stuff that breaks, there are some benefits to that. There's not benefits to necessities being more expensive for regular people. There's no benefits
Right.
to that I see. I'm going to bring up one more because one or two more. So one thing that has been disturbing to me is how my auto insurance is just so much more expensive. And that, it's a law that I have to have auto insurance and I'm just cutting it to the bone, but it's still so much more expensive than it was like 5 years ago or 7 years ago before the pandemic.
Mhm.
And I don't know. So am I the only one that's experienced that or have you noticed that as well? Or
Well, I've been with the same insurance company for a long time. My car insurance has crept up a little bit. They've been pretty reasonable.
so what's your company? Let's give a shout out to a reasonable company.
State Farm has been pretty good. And so they're not going bonkers. One pet peeve of mine though is it's just about insurance. And you get a new car, so I had my old car.
True.
And you get a new car, and so your insurance is way up because you have this new car with less miles and a newer car. But the price never goes down.
Oh, I know. I know.
10 years later, you're paying the same amount as that brand new car. So I don't comprehend that. This is slightly on a different note, but it's related to cars. It just boggles my mind the whole smog check scam. There's all these hybrid, and I guess people with electric cars don't have to have a smog check, but I have a hybrid, and I'm still. I had a respite from doing the smog check when I first got the car, but apparently that expires and you have to get a. But I hate getting the smog. It just seems like yet another auto expense that is somehow rigged. And I realized maybe older cars should be smog checked and it should be part of an environmental thing. But
There's basically the cost of owning a car has gone up quite a bit. And so what people are doing is they're keeping their cars for much, much longer than they used to. And there's some good things about that. I mean,
yeah, they're better. They are better made, so they
Yep.
seem to be holding up. The maintenance is critical. It used to be you'd have to get your oil changed every 3 or 4 thousand miles, and now a lot of these new cars you only need to get it changed once a year, or which has also gone way up, by the way. But probably because you're only getting it changed once a year as opposed to 5 times a year or whatever. But yeah, cars do seem to be a lot more efficient and reliable. So that's a good thing.
yeah, there is a new scam though, speaking of insurance and cars, which is repair insurance.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've seen the commercials for that where you're. Uh, yeah.
Yeah. So the enterprising nature of people trying to take your money has not subsided. And I'm sure there are so many more things that we could complain about, like
Yes.
cell phone fees. What the heck are those what are those? What are they?
Yeah, that's up there with the health insurance with these mystery. You sign a contract for whatever amount a month, and then it ends up being
It's not that.
$20 more because of the
The mystery fees.
the mystery fees and I think that also maybe this isn't as bad, but I think that also applies to the internet too. There's all these mystery fees on the internet bill is not as crazy as your cell phone, but they keep adding them on too. That seems
They
that
do.
each year there's like a new, a new, and that truly is nickel and diming. I mean, you
It
look
really
at
is. It
yeah.
really is.
Yeah, and that's and also along those lines, like you sign up for with the internet, the new customers for 2 years, you get at this
Yeah, exactly. The bait and switch.
yeah, whatever happened to being a loyal customer
Nope.
and just being charged the straight amount for as long as you're a customer? But no. It's
No.
you're at 2 years, and then you have to waste your precious time to get on the phone with them to kindly request that they honor that introductory price. And I don't think they still do that anymore. They used to be a regular thing. Every 6 months, I'd have to call my cable company to get them.
And negotiate with them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it has been a pleasure ranting with you,
Thank you
Bridget.
for the opportunity to rant.
We'll see if this is the first of many rants to come. Anyway, thank you once again.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thanks
Bye.
again. Thanks for listening.